So real quick before the video starts, if you guys enjoy it, remember to leave a like. If you want to see more like it, then remember to subscribe. I will be covering the new superstitious items and all that, continuing with reincarnation stuff as well, so if you want to see that, you're looking forward to it, subscribe. Anyway, today I'm going to be looking at all of the new egg-based items that were added. All 25 of them, the 24 that you earn from collecting eggs, and the 25th, the reward that you get for getting every single egg. Now I am probably going to go a little bit faster in this video because there is a lot to get through. There are 25 items that I have to review, so some of them I'm probably not going to spend as long on. There are a couple where I'll probably slow down and explain things a little bit if I find them a little bit more interesting, but for the most part, I'm going to be going pretty quickly. So if things seem a little bit fast, that's why. Probably won't be as in-depth as some of my other item reviews, but with that being said, start things off with the Amber Fossilizer. This is a way up high. It has a base multiplier of 0 times, but every second the multiplier increases by about 0.016, so the longer ores are alive, the more multiplier this thing is going to have. They have to be around for at least a minute to get a positive multiplier at all, and this thing caps off at 10 times. So I would say this thing is pretty bad. It's a way up high. It starts with a low multiplier. In fact, a negative multiplier until ores have been alive for over a minute. But it does cap out pretty high, so if you're going for cent, if you need multiplier, this thing wouldn't be too bad later on in the setup. If you're not worried as much about speed, this thing can be pretty good. So certainly not a bad one if you're a lower life. Decent cap and all that. Not very good for me though, I'm not a huge fan of the item myself. Next up, the Cosmic Device. This is a hydraulics-based item. It works kind of like the gravitational gear work, but this thing just has a flat multiplier of 13 times, which is actually pretty solid. Now, it does have an interesting kind of conveyor where it sort of has a upside-down ramp type of thing. So in that regard, it's a little bit weird, but this thing is just a 13 times multiplier. I'm not sure if it works well with cannons or anything, but I'm sure you can make it work. And it's just a pretty solid multiplier. This thing, I would say, is just a decent enough item. Moving on to the Shield Generator. This generates a shield. It's exactly how it sounds, and if you need a shield, then it can be pretty good. If not, then whatever, it's just kind of a throwaway item. Next up, the Methane Sky Fleet. This is yet another hydraulic upgrader. This one works a little bit differently. It has a multiplier based on height. It has a 1 times multiplier if the elevation's 1 to 2. If it's raised 3, it has a 2 times multiplier. 4 or 5, it has a 3 times multiplier. 6 or 7, it's 4 times, and 8 to 11 is 5 times. So this thing is honestly a decent upgrader. It's not great. With that being said though, it is a very small upgrader. It's only 3 long, so a 5 multiplier is not too bad for the size. And if you're able to use it while it's fully raised, then it can be a pretty decent upgrader for you. That being said, it can be a little bit annoying to use, but I don't know, I would say it's a decent enough upgrader. If you need the multiplier, it works. I'm probably not personally going to be getting any use out of it, but don't have many big problems with it. Next up, the Coconut Drencher. This one has a multiplier in between 1 and 4 million, I believe. Wiki doesn't have full stats on it, but it doesn't really matter because this thing is just bad. It's a bad cell furnace. Not really worth using, not very good. I'm gonna choose to ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist. Moving on to something that is extremely not bad, and in fact quite good, and probably one of the best items in this update, the Cybeg 9000. This is a portable upgrader. It has a 10 multiplier, and it sets ores on fire. Has a nice beam so that even next to big upgraders you can fit this thing and get it into your setups. Has a very high multiplier of 10, which is really good for a portable upgrader, and this thing is just great. It's a super good item. All you have to do is worry about the fire, which isn't hard to get rid of. And for any player, this thing is good. If you're going for speed, it's good. If you just want multiplier, it's a good multiplier. If you're low life, this is going to be a really useful upgrader just generally. It's just a great upgrader. Definitely get this one if you're able to. It's really strong. Next up, another pretty solid upgrader, honestly. We've got the Deviled Blaster. This is a pretty fierce-looking blaster item that you can get. Has a whopping 14 multiplier, which for a blaster item is pretty good. And this thing just works like a normal blaster, like Big Bad Blaster, Hydra Blaster, all that. Has a 20% chance to destroy your ores, and it's fully loopable, and honestly, this thing isn't too terrible. Especially if you're a lower life, this thing can be pretty good. If you have to choose between a Big Bad Blaster and a Dragon Blaster and this thing, this is going to be your best option. It is worth noting this is one of the higher life items. You have to be 900 plus to get this thing, so you definitely can't cheese it at a really low life, but if you're able to get it even somewhat close to that 900 life requirement, this thing might not be too bad for you. Pretty good, I like it. Next up, the Dust Devil. This is a little cool tornado upgrader, and I just realized I have my particles off. There we go, now the item looks a lot better. This has a base multiplier of 3 times, and the multiplier is based on how big the ores are. If they're smaller, they're going to get a lower multiplier, around maybe 2 times. If they're on the bigger side, they'll get maybe a 4 to 5 multiplier, and I would say this thing is a pretty decent upgrader. If you're a lower life, it can be helpful. If you're a higher life, it's probably not going to be too useful, but it is just an extra upgrader. You can probably use it for scent and stuff. I'm probably not going to be using the upgrader too much, but it's not bad. I definitely think that it can be quite useful. Next up, we've got the Illusions of Void. This is the Void Maze egg that you can get. This is the upgrader you get for it. It has a 9 multiplier, and it gives your ores 1 shield. And shield will save them from getting killed 1 time. If they run into, say, a big bad blaster and would have exploded, I believe they'll get saved from it. And this thing also, as of right now, has a bug where you can actually use the Indoctrinator with it and instantly educate ores. That's not intentional, it's a little bit broken, but it is in the game right now. It's gonna get fixed, so I wouldn't rely on it or anything. But it is worth mentioning that that is something that it can do right now. It is relatively small, it's got a solid multiplier, and it does have the shield effect, so this thing isn't too terrible, to be honest. Decent multiplier, just a nice extra upgrader if you need it. And also it has the benefit of having a high upgrader beam that you can fit underneath hydraulic platforms and still get the upgrade. But so even for me, this thing is actually a useful upgrader because I can use it without taking up any extra space, which is a cool little benefit of it. Pretty good item, definitely worth going for. Especially since that's one that you can guarantee getting from the Void Maze. Next up, an item that a lot of you guys probably unfortunately won't actually see this update, the Reaper's Fortress. This is the egg yield item that you can get. Little cat tree, I like the aesthetics of it. I like that it's a little cat tree, it's a fun little item. It has a multiplier of 5 to 7.5 times. Now, considering it's way up high, it's probably not going to be all that useful for me. I don't really like way up highs. But the multiplier is pretty decent on it, especially considering the size of the item. So if you're someone who's a bit of a lower life, or you just need extra upgraders, you need the multiplier, this thing can be pretty good. It's got a decent enough multiplier. Pretty okay. Moving on, an item that I would say is pretty terrible. We've got the Egg Scream Refiner. Has a multiplier of 4 times, but it freezes the ore in place for 15 seconds. Yeah, if ores go through this thing, they get a whopping 4 multiplier on a weird conveyor and like this kind of weird closed off upgrader. And then they get frozen in place for 15 seconds. Now, if you really need the multiplier, then sure, I guess you can use this thing, but like, even if you're not going for speed, it's gotta be really tedious to just sit there and wait for your ore to unfreeze for 15 seconds while nothing else is happening. At least if you're using something like Draydons, you know that in those 8 seconds it's upgrading and you're getting a really solid multiplier from just the one item. This thing, it just kind of freezes. Got a weird, annoying conveyor, kind of unconventional, not super common. And it's just bad. It's just a bad upgrader. Low multiplier, annoying to use. I don't really like it. Moving on to an item that I would say is actually one of the best of the update. We've got the Energy Core. This thing is a portable upgrader, and it's got this ore around it that you can see while you're placing it. And any ores that are inside that ore when it's placed, they get upgraded. And this thing is a 4 times multiplier. Got a decent enough sized radius. It's not huge, but you'll be able to find a place for it in your setup pretty easily. And this thing, you know how I feel about portable upgraders. All of them are pretty much great. This thing is a 4 times multiplier. It has a lot of good use. It is worth mentioning that sometimes if you have it in your setup, the aura can cause loading issues for whatever reason. It's kind of bugged. I'm sure it'll get fixed soon. But if you have it next to, say, like a hydraulic platform or something, or underneath it, some of the stuff might not be able to load. You might run into issues with it, so if you're getting setup loading issues that you weren't having before, maybe look to this thing. It might be this. Other than that, though, it's just a good upgrade. Moving on once more, we've got the Gators Cove. This is a pretty cool looking upgrader. I like the little barrel aesthetic. And this has 2 different multipliers. If your ores have 0 upgrades, it'll be 10 times. And if they have any more than that, they'll be 5 times. So essentially, this thing will give you a slight boost if you use it right at the beginning, but any ores that have more than an upgrade count of 0 will get a 5 times multiplier. Considering the size, that's still not bad. It's got a decently big beam. It's fairly middle of the road multiplier. You're probably not going to be seeing me use this thing all that much. I don't really like it, but it is just a decent enough upgrader. If you need the multiplier, if you need extra upgraders to get where you need to be, this thing can definitely help with that. It's just solid. Moving on once again, we've got easily one of the most unique and interesting items of this event, the Eye Teleporter. And this thing has a really cool effect. It has a base multiplier of 9 times, and the way it works is you have to use it with a platform, and if you put it up here, ores that go into it will drop down below it. So you can use it up here and then send ores down below. Has a solid multiplier and a kind of weird effect, but I do think there are actually some pretty good uses for it. There are definitely benefits to this thing. You can certainly just use it as an upgrader as well. It's pretty good in that regard. And I don't know exactly the best ways to use this yet. I'm sure people will discover some really cool ways to abuse this thing and take advantage of it, but it's just a cool item. It's sort of an extra teleporter. It has a nice multiplier. it's a really cool item. Next up, we've got another item that, in my opinion, is not very good from this update, which is the legendary black hole, or as I like to call it, the leg. Got sort of an odd effect, sort of a weird effect, where it'll suck ores in, attract them to the item, give them a 20 multiplier, and then it spits them out in random spots. Takes 5 seconds to actually suck in the ores and then spit them out. And even though this thing does have a high multiplier, main problem that I have with it is it's just weird and annoying to use. It's kind of out of the way to use it. Multiplier's good, but it's easily obtainable with other stuff. Really not all that useful in my opinion. Next up, the Malicious Incubator. This is another kind of weird upgrader. It's got sort of this zigzaggy weird conveyor here. Has kind of cool aesthetics. I actually really like how the item looks. Got these weird like goopy green alien holes. That sounds really bad. Has a pretty high multiplier though, it's actually 15 times. And it does give the poison effect, that means ores will be destroyed in 4 seconds. You gotta use like a deadly spore with it or something. And this is an item that I'm not gonna be using a whole lot, but I will say, even though I don't really like the item and I'm not gonna be using it, it is just a pretty decent item. If you don't really care about speed or anything, you've got a deadly spore or whatever to save your ores, this thing can be quite good. 15 multiplier is just a solid upgrade, really good, better than most of the other upgraders released. So if you're in need of multiplier, this thing is a good item. And next up, we actually have another pretty cool and solid upgrader, the Moai God. And the Moai God is an 8 times multiplier, but it has a chance of setting your ores on fire. And for how small it is, 8 times is a pretty good multiplier. And once again, if you're on the lower side of lives, this thing is just a really good multiplier for you. And even if you're higher, this thing could still have some use just because of the fact that it's small and it's still got an 8 times multiplier. I also like its name just because I like going Moai. And moving on, we've got the Dubious Guardian. This is a noob who is a zombie who will attack players. That's all it is, that's all it does. You get 10 of them, and this is the one you get for doing the John Doe trial. And it is certainly an item in the game. Next up, the Obsidian Infusion device, the item that everybody thought was going to be an infuser before they actually got it and realized it was just a worse molten forge. And I kind of spoiled what the item does. Those of you who don't know what the molten forge is, though, it essentially just makes your ores a lot more dense, makes them heavier, makes them easier to control with certain things. Makes blasters launch them a lot less far. It's generally useful in a lot of cases. And this thing is essentially that. It does have the added bonus of a 6 multiplier if ores are on fire. And it takes a few seconds to actually apply the effect. Once it's done, it gives a 2 times multiplier, which can be 12 times if the ores are on fire. And then they become dense from it. So it's essentially just a molten forge, which can be either worse or better depending on how you use it. It's okay. It's a good multiplier if you get ores on fire. Being a player with the Molten Forge, I don't find much value in it, but it's still a pretty decent item. Has one of the higher end multipliers. And yeah, it's an alright item. Next up, an item that is pretty not alright, it's pretty trash. It does have one pretty cool benefit, which I really like about it. But this is a furnace, it has a base 50 multiplier, and if ores are wet, it gives them a 100 multiplier. I also realized I forgot to say the name of it. This is the Octopi Council. This thing will judge your ores, and clearly it judges them pretty harshly, because even if they're wet, is not very generous with the multiplier that it gives. This item is just kind of trash. Next up, we've got another portable upgrader, the Portable Pearl Enhancer, and this thing is essentially a better aura-based upgrader. If you thought the other one was good, this thing is better. It has a bigger radius to upgrade by, and it does 6 times. But this thing is just good. It's a solid upgrader. I believe it has the same problem as the other one. I don't know for sure, but if you have loading issues, look to this thing. It's good though. And now, something that people have been wanting quite a bit, an extra teleporter set. It is essentially the Goliath Skull, but smaller and slightly worse in multiplier. It is the Sandshark Sender and Sandshark Receiver. The teleporter set has a 10 times multiplier, and ores get set on fire when they go through it. Now, the 10 times multiplier is pretty good. Also, the fact that it's another teleporter set, that's really good as well. And the fact that it sets ores on fire is pretty easy to deal with. And this thing is actually pretty good. It's about the same size as a normal teleporter, at least the receiver is. Sender's a little bit bigger, but this thing is just a pretty solid item. I definitely like it. I recommend using it. Little baby Goliath skulls. Pretty cool. And we're closing in on the end here. We've got the Vaporwave Ive Visualizer, and this thing is aesthetically one of my favorite. I just really like the sort of neon pinky purple aesthetic, the sort of vibe that it's going for. And it also has a pretty good upgrade. It's a 7 times multiplier, which is just solid, and it also makes ores neon, which is actually really good. Cool to be getting more upgraders that actually have this effect and make ores neon. And if you have the optic origin, this thing works pretty well with it. It's a nice little synergy. Even then, if not, the multiplier is still just solid. This is a pretty good upgrader. I like it. This is a good one. Definitely go for it. And finally, out of all of the egg items that aren't the Fabergé egg item, we've got the Vitamin C Coater, aka the Water Malone upgrader. This thing actually has a few effects. Has a 6 times multiplier, turns ores into little mini watermelons, and has a chance to duplicate them. This thing can act as almost like a stand-in little duplicator for you. Little spawns bonus ores and stuff, could be pretty useful. Multiplier is pretty good for the size, and it's just a pretty solid upgrader, I would say. And it also has an added benefit, which is that it makes this noise.
This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. It's watermelon inside a watermelon.
You know, I haven't actually heard that sound effect. When I said Water Malone earlier, I didn't actually know that that was the sound effect. But yeah, this is just because of that, great item, 10 out of 10. Legit though, it is a solid item. Good multiplier, good effect, pretty cool. And finally, we have the Ruby Crystallizer. This is the item that you get once you get all 24 egg items. It's awarded to you immediately. All you gotta do is claim all 24 eggs, and you get this thing. And I would say, genuinely, this is, at least for me, one of the most useful egg items that they added. Now, it does have a weird raised conveyor, which can be kind of annoying, but it's got a big upgrader beam, and it's times 10. It is also a very small upgrader, coming in at 3 units long. And this thing, even if you're not in my position where you're going for speed and certain things make upgraders better, this thing is still good. 10 times upgrade is solid, it's a good multiplier and all that. Slightly weird and annoying conveyor to deal with, but it's really not that bad. All you need to do is use a ramp or something. Even though it's not the most bombastic reward, it's still a nice little solid upgrader that found its way into my setup, and I like it. I think it's pretty good. Definitely a worthy reward for collecting all of the eggs, I think. And with that being said, that is every single egg-based item that was added in this event. That was a lot. I hope I did a decent enough job explaining myself and explaining the items. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm gonna be reviewing the new superstitious items and talking about the buffs to the old ones as well. That'll probably be tomorrow's video, so stick around for that. Real soon, I'm also gonna be starting a Life 1 series, starting from the beginning on Miner's Haven once again. Playing through the game with all of the new Reincarnation stuff and seeing just how everything plays and how it's different and all that. So I think that'll be fun, so if you're looking forward to that as well, stick around. And yeah, I think that's all I got for this one. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for the support. The egg tutorial video absolutely popped off, which really kind of surprised me. I didn't expect it to do as well as it did. So thank you for watching. I'm gonna stop sitting here and rambling to you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Peace out, everyone.